For those of you who listened to Vajratara's talk last week, you'll be familiar that she spoke about three aspects of Shraddha. And Shraddha is what we place the heart upon, what we're confident in, what we rely on, what sort of pulls us forward in life. And she talked about three aspects of this, three aspects that I think are components of Shraddha for everybody: head, heart, and gut. But for many of us, there's a leading edge or an emphasis in how we sort of feel our way towards something. In my own case, it's definitely been the head. The head makes it sound rather dry. It was more a question of a sort of philosophical curiosity from a young age. So I'd like to talk about that. I'd like to share my journey and how that orientation in me that appeared at a very young age, how that's been one of my greatest friends in life. And actually, it's been a very interesting exercise, just reflecting on the Shraddha and how it's manifested through my life. And I realized for the first time it's broken into three very distinct chronological phases. There was three different ways Shraddha manifested. So the journey started for me, I think it's virtually my first childhood memory. I grew up in an attic bedroom under a little skylight, and I could see the stars at night. And I remember I can only have been 6 or 7, but I remember being fascinated by the question whether the universe is finite or infinite. So I'd think, well, it can't be infinite, it has to be finite. But then I'd think, well, when you get to the end of the universe, what's there? Maybe a brick wall? Well, behind the brick wall, there'll be something. So it must be infinite, but it can't be infinite. So I remember grappling with questions like this, and this being one of my deepest pleasures. And when I moved from Scotland to England, the school I went to had a really amazing library. And I can remember in my lunch, this is always a sign that we're really keen on something. In my lunch hours, my greatest pleasure would be to go to this library that had some ancient books. And I'd just be so excited plowing through these books by Bertrand Russell and Freddie Ayres and Kant. And I can't claim that I really understood what I was reading. In fact, I didn't understand what I was reading. But looking back, it was a very exciting search. It was as if there was an answer I was looking for and there was something I'd lost. And this took its clearest form. Physics was my favorite subject. Physics for me was as exciting as a good Dharma class. As a child, I think I'd be in access concentration. And we were doing Hooke's law. If any of you know Hooke's law, that's about the elasticity of things. And I just remember being in ecstasy studying this. But also had this very, very clear thought that this is okay as far as it goes. But it's not enough. There's a law that lies behind everything, and I'm going to find it. And I remember being very excited by this thought. So this theme continued. It included a search. This is a language I didn't have at the time, but a search for the transcendental. So I really tried to develop faith and a belief in God. So I was really looking for something, but one of my early spiritual experiences was realizing that I didn't have to do that. I didn't actually have to believe in the way that was being suggested. And I remember a couple of days of really elevated states of consciousness followed just from that realization. I didn't have to believe in that particular way. So the search continued, but at this stage, the search was just a confidence that there were questions that were worth asking and that the answer had some value. So it wasn't a Shraddha in a view or a teacher or a teaching. It was just I had a confidence in an approach. And looking back, there was a certain ardency and commitment to that and a great pleasure. Although there was also, I came to realize a degree of suffering, because that sense of looking for something, but it was like I'd lost something. That suffering was added to by the fact that I found myself outside the mainstream religious views. So that was the first stage, and it was a sort of philosophical commitment and a confidence that there were questions worth asking. And I regard that as Shraddha. That was the Shraddha manifested in in my early years. Towards the end of my teenage years, that began to manifest as a search for a teacher and a teachings that I could that could begin to answer some of my questions. And wisely or unwisely, I rejected everything I came across. It was this was the 80s, and there was the Penguin Green Arcana series, and actually you could access teachers from Bubba Free John to Steiner. I think it was quite a vibrant period, but I remember just being dissatisfied with everything I'd found, including Christianity, which I incidentally feel a lot more generous towards nowadays than I did then. But just none of these teachings spoke to me. They didn't seem to answer the really important questions. There was an exception. I did come across the Buddha, and there was two things really intrigued me about the Buddhist teaching. The first thing was the promise of a state of awakening in this life, that one could awaken as if from a dream in this lifetime. And I thought, well, if that's true, I want that. And the second one was I went straight to the back of the, straight to the end of the puzzle book of the universe, and I found this law called conditioned co-production. And I had the nous, I had the intelligence to realize I didn't understand what it was saying and why it was significant. But it did leave me with a suspicion that the Buddha was either a wild goose chase or the world teacher, because conditioned co-production looked such an unusual place to start. So I did keep revisiting that. I did study the Buddhist scriptures, but very much as somebody who was getting on with my life. I was running a business. I married a very good woman who some of you know, and I had two lovely children. But this next phase included a quiet, still voice that just said, "Is this it?" Because I actually, in many ways, I had enjoyed very early success. I'd gained everything I wanted, but there was this little, "Is this it?" And I didn't ignore that quiet voice. And actually, the end of this phase occurred when I did enjoy a temporary expansion in my consciousness and my awareness, where I saw something and felt I'd been seen by something that manifested as a shaft of light, and saw spontaneously a whole number of things, and immediately recognized that this is what the Buddha was pointing to. The Buddha wasn't just a clever teacher urging us to be good. Actually, the Buddha was really pointing at a possibility for consciousness and liberation that was very, very freeing. So at that moment, I knew I was a Buddhist and a follower of the Buddha, and that ended a second phase. Yeah, I'll move on because I know my 8 minutes is coming up, actually. The third phase was part of this seeing was knowing that I had to come into communication with others who had seen and were committed in the way that I had actually been committed privately for years. When I was putting this together, I realized this was a completely private journey. I'd never met anybody I could speak to about these things. But following that event, I wanted to find a community or build a community. I needed that communication. That manifested when I came across Sangharakshita. Actually, the first Buddhist I met, Amoghavamsa, followed by hearing Sangharakshita's voice. Within a few sentences, I knew he knew, and then going to Vajraloka, which became an early sacred place for me, and I knew I was home. So I sort of realized as I put this together that that early search, just asking questions and having the courage not to have answers, led eventually to the Buddha jewel and the Dharma jewel, and that I had to then find the Sangha jewel. So, well, that's my 8 minutes, actually more than that. So that's sped past. So I'll just finish with a health warning that being a doctrine follower, being a philosophical type's clearly been important and has worked very well. It's been a very great blessing in my life, but I think we're all very, very different in this respect. So luckily you're going to hear about some other orientations and approaches. But I'll just finish by saying, if there are questions that move you and intrigue you, take them seriously and stay with them. Because as the Bible says, seek and ye shall find.
Thank you, Achara. Okay, so in the Bodhicharyavatara, it describes our precious human life as a vessel, as a boat. It says, making use of this vessel of able human life, get free from the mighty river of suffering. Since such a craft will be hard to come across in the future, don't fall into confusion. There is no time for sleep. And I like this metaphor because it makes two things really, really clear. First, we've actually got the boat. We have our life. And secondly, we have to make use of it if we're going to get free from suffering. So how am I meant to actually make use of this life? What am I actually meant to be doing? Well, I think I could start by doing faith. The Buddha said that faith is the beginning of all good things. It's a beginning, but we have to keep doing it. We have to keep faithing, as Sharon Salzberg puts it. She's very clear that in Pali, faith isn't a noun. It doesn't name a quality we've got or we don't have. It's a verb, it's something we do. She says Shraddha is the willingness to take the next step, to see the unknown as an adventure and to launch a journey. So there's a real responsibility there. It's on us to faith, to actually keep doing it, to keep showing up. And faith is actually totally necessary in the spiritual life. It's not an added extra. It's not a nice bit of, woo-woo that adds a bit of sparkle to all that study and meditation. Without faith, we don't make progress. We don't change. In the Ornament of Precious Liberation, Gampopa is absolutely clear on this point. He quotes the Ten Dharma Sutra, which says the noble qualities will not arise in someone without faith, just as a green shoot will not emerge from a scorched seed. So faithing is definitely our responsibility. It's our job. It's part of the bargain. All right. So writing this talk, I thought, well, how do I actually do it? So as Achara said, the meaning of Shraddha is to place the heart upon. So that verb Shraddha, that doing word, what you're actually doing is you're placing your heart upon something. And I really like this expression because there's so much in it. When I think of it, I picture my heart in all its fragile, messy, vulnerable state, and it's resting on something that looks like a smooth, reliable pebble. Now, you don't have to think of it like that. I just happen to like pebbles. But whatever image comes into your mind, this metaphor has got a lot in it. Firstly, I think it involves effort. You're placing your heart somewhere and that invokes an image of picking it up and putting it down on something quite deliberately and carefully. There's effort involved. And secondly, it means choosing where to put it. You're not just letting it get attached to anything, any kind of distracting thing, thought, person that passes by. You're actually exercising some discernment. And this effort and choice brings us into the realm of value. This isn't a method about giving our hearts away or losing our hearts. It's about valuing that which we place our hearts upon. And crucially, it's also about valuing our hearts themselves. Sharon Salzberg again, who I love her writing on faith, to offer our hearts in faith means recognizing that our hearts are worth something, that we ourselves in our deepest and truest nature are of value. So what's heart faith? That's what I'm meant to be talking about. Well, I think it's knowing that our hearts are worth something, a lot. And what we value, the Buddha, Dharma and Sangha, are also worth something. Heart faith feels that value. And moments of heart faith are often experienced as a delightful calmness or relief. And in one of his talks, Subhuti said that we experience these feelings because we just forget ourselves. And when he said that, I wondered what he meant by it. And I thought it might be worth thinking about, exploring a bit. For me, in these moments, I think forgetting myself is about forgetting my idea of myself. Those ideas about myself as me, definitely me, fixed or at least consistently enough to be recognisable through time, quite distinct from you, definitely distinct from them, and somewhat central to the story. And it's those kind of ideas that we all have. And in moments of forgetting those ideas of self and feeling a heart faith, what I'm doing is placing my heart upon my own Buddha nature. Every human has Buddha nature, the potential to reach an enlightened state. Back to Gampopa, he says that just as it is possible to obtain the silver that is in ore, and the oil that is in sesame seeds, and the butter that is in milk, so it is possible to attain the Buddhahood that is in all sentient beings. Again, I love these metaphors because they seem quite magically upside down. I get how milk is in butter, but it's mind-boggling to ponder on exactly how silver is in the ore or butter in the milk. But I don't think we're meant to try and solve it. We just let the metaphors do their work. So Buddha nature, when I think about whether or not I might have Buddha nature, my mind can be tempted to weigh it up and quickly turn it into a game of solidifying myself or selfing that goes something like really, I have Buddha nature. I know we all do, but I'm probably different. I probably don't have it. But that's missing the point. I was at an online seminar last week with a Buddhist nun called Pema Deki or Emma Slade. And she asked us to turn those kind of reflections around. And rather than think about whether we have Buddha nature, to consider how our Buddha nature actually views us. She suggested that Buddha nature looks at us with care, without judgment, and feels joy that we have a human life. Clarity, tenderness, love, and that joy again. Can we have this kind of heart faith in ourselves, or can I? So I asked myself where I might have experienced heart faith. And two things just immediately came to mind. And I'll end by talking briefly about those. The first was when I first saw the earth touching mudra, that hand position that you see on some Buddha rupas where the Buddha is touching the earth. And he touched the earth to ask it to witness all of the lifetimes in which he practiced morality, kindness, and wisdom, and also to witness his interconnection with all living things. When I first saw Buddha rupas with that earth-touching mudra, I was just drawn to them, and they felt right in some way. And I didn't know what they meant, but I felt that confidence and that joy of heart faith that this was something of real value, and also that it wasn't separate to me. And the second thing was a very simple interaction I had with Shantabhadri, who may one day become my preceptor. After months of talking with friends about whether to ask her if she considered being my preceptor, going through the pros and cons with my GFR group, ruining perfectly good dog walks with friends in the order, with those circular kind of what if questions, and deliberating whether or not to write her a letter. In the end, I just asked her. And it was very, very simple, because in my asking her and in her immediate agreement that we should just make a start, we were relating to each other's potential as Dharma practitioners and as would-be bodhisattvas. And in that moment, we both had, and we continue to have, faith in each other and in ourselves. And I think it was a moment of heart faith, of forgetting those ideas of self and placing our hearts upon our own Buddha natures, and then remembering that they've been there all the time.
Right, I'm just going to put on gallery view so I can see not just my big fat face, but everybody, because it's so nice to see everyone. I'm just sorry that I can't see everybody all at once. I can only see 25 of you, but that'll have to do. So imagine that I can see all the other pages. So yeah, so I have to talk now about the guts. So all of Shraddha is about placing our faith, our heart on something which is higher. Very distracting. I can even see myself now. I'm just going to get rid of my face. Oh, there we go. That's better. Right, I can concentrate. Yes, all the faith is about placing our heart on something higher. This aspect of faith is the volitional aspect. So it's not just that we place our heart on something, we then want to go there. We want to move towards that thing on which we place our heart. It's the aspect is about wanting to act and wanting to move. And if you know me, you won't be surprised that I looked up the Pali for this. And the Pali is Abhilasa Shraddha. And Abhilasa means desire, wish, or longing. So it's when we've kind of connected with something beautiful, something higher, and we want it, we're hungry for it. It's as if what's higher is like a magnet and we're being drawn towards it, or we want to draw that thing towards us like a magnet. So I think it's really interesting to reflect on desire, the role of desire here, and if some of you might have come across the term Dharma Chanda, which means desire for the Dharma. And I think you can get the impression from reading about Buddhism that it thinks all desire is really bad. And I certainly got that impression when I was in my early days, and I found it extremely unattractive, because I thought, well, what I don't want to do is get to the point where I don't want anything or desire anything. That sounds awful. And actually, Buddhism doesn't say that at all. It says, well, desire is really important, but we need to desire what is truly beautiful, what's truly skillful, and cultivate desire for that. And I think that's what this aspect of Shraddha is very much speaking to. And because the Dharma life is a very active life, we go for refuge, we practice, we meditate, we do this. We don't just sit there, we do stuff, don't we? And unless we have the motivation and the desire to do it, we won't do anything, because we're very much desiderative beings, as Bhante says. So I was really pleased. So thank you for asking me to give this talk, because, you know, when you have to give a talk, you really have to think about something. And I don't think I've ever really thought about this aspect of faith deeply. So I've been thinking about it deeply since I was asked. And what I've decided that, at least as far as I can work out, there's like two flavors of this sort of what I call longing faith in my experience. And I'm calling these, the first one being in touch with the possibility primarily, and the second one, it's more about being in touch with absence. So and I'll give you two little vignettes which kind of might unpack these a little bit. So the first one, being in touch with the possibility. So I really was in touch with this kind of Shraddha when I first came to the centre. So I came to the Buddhist centre, I heard the Dharma from Vajratara and Vedanya, and I was absolutely like blown away. And I was like, oh wow, this is amazing. But it wasn't just, oh wow, this is amazing. It was like, and I'm doing this. Like, I was absolutely obsessed. Like, I read book after book. I listened to talk after talk. I was at the Buddhist Center every weekend, sometimes both days of the weekend. I was just absolutely, I couldn't get enough of it. It's all I wanted to do. It's like seeing the beauty of what was possible had just thrown the rest of everything, my experience, into relief. And it just seemed less important, just seemed less crucial somehow. So it just completely captured my heart. The possibilities that existed had captured my heart, and I automatically, very naturally, wanted to move towards them. So that's what I'm calling this first kind of flavour of longing Shraddha. being really, really in touch with the possibility of something and just naturally wanting to move in that direction. I don't experience this flavour of longing Shraddha as being particularly kind of spacious and relaxing. I find it a very fiery kind of experience where I just want to kind of do, I want to act, I want to move. It's I feel inspired and alive, and there's a spring in my step, and everything seems a lot easier. So meditation seems easier, study seems easier. I just want to do these things very naturally. So in a sense, it also has a feeling of being a bit more integrated, because there's more of me behind, there's more energy going in that direction. There's less of me pulling in different directions, because the strength of my desire is so potent. It's just driving me in one direction. There's lots of really lovely examples of this kind of Shraddha in the Pali Canon. For example, you know, when people come across the Buddha and he teaches the Dharma, they're all like, oh, "This is brilliant, I want to take, please can I become a monk, I go for refuge." Like their automatic response is that they hear something, they respond, and then they want to go for refuge, they want to respond. But I think my favourite one is a really sweet little verse from when Pingia and his mates, when they learn about the Buddha and the Buddha exists, and his teacher sends them off to meet the Buddha, and it describes how they walk to see the Buddha. They're climbing up this mountain, and it says they climbed up the mountain path with the zeal and haste of a merchant drawn to wealth, or a thirsty man drawn to cool water, or a man with sunstroke to shade. So I just love that. It's like they're not just like, oh yeah, whatever, the Buddha. They're just like desperate to get to the Buddha. They're desperate. And I suppose that's my experience, is when I'm in touch with this kind of flavour of Abhilasa Shraddha. So that's all very lovely. The second flavour I feel feels a little less lovely, but in some ways more affecting. And I'm calling this being more in touch with the absence. So my little story about this one is it's not a particularly dramatic moment, but it happened in the last week when I was kind of reflecting on this area. So it became more obvious to me this is what was going on. So I was in a slightly less positive state. I was feeling quite ill. I had a really upset tummy. I hadn't had enough sleep because my dog was waking me up at 5 in the morning. I was feeling overwhelmed, quite anxious, caught up with the mundane, you know how it is. You just get a bit overwhelmed, don't you? I was feeling probably a bit sorry for myself, to be honest. And very, very far away from any sort of profound, deep mental states, indeed. And then in the middle of all of that, I was sitting on my bed and I just looked up, and at the bottom of my bed is my shrine. And my shrine is very lovely, I think. And it's got a very nice Buddha Rupa, which has a very peaceful face. And he's sitting in a very, very sturdy, restful, unanxious posture. And there's lots of blue on my shrine because I meditate on the blue Buddha, Akshobhya. So there's lots and lots of blue. Blue to me is very potent colour, representing like potential, expansiveness, meaning. And there's a Vajra on there. There's all sorts of nice things. Anyway, when I saw that in that moment, I was just filled with longing for that state, which was so very far away from the state I was currently in, so far away. And it was like, oh, I just wanted so much a glimpse of that peace and freedom. And it's not that it was an impossible state. I think the thing that characterizes this aspect of faith is that it's not like, oh, I'm so rubbish, I can't be peaceful. It's like, oh, I know I could have it, but I don't have it. Why don't I have it? So it's a really really, really kind of, we call it the gut aspect of Shraddha, and I really feel it kind of gut wrenching moments there. And I actually cried. I think it was so kind of strong, the experience. So I think this is why I call this kind of the flavour, which is more linked to an awareness of the absence. But I think although it's quite painful, it's quite a meaningful and beautiful experience as well, actually, because just in the very awareness of my distance from what I found beautiful, it sort of reorientated me, a bit like a compass being reset or something. So I then knew, oh, actually, this is what my life is for. It's for that. This other stuff, doesn't matter. It's that. And that is quite calming and in itself. And I just kind of felt quite reset by that. So I find that a kind of interesting paradox. There's something about the desperation to be united with that beauty brings me closer to the beauty itself. And I just want to finish with a little example of this in my music. So I play a lot of piano and I teach piano. And recently I've become completely obsessed with Bach, who I never liked at all before. And in particular with an arrangement of an organ sonata that he wrote. And when I first heard this, I was just totally obsessed with it. And I was listening to it over and over and over again. And every time I listened to it, it's like I was in pain, like physically in pain, because of the possibility it suggested of something transcendental and beautiful beyond what I was currently experiencing. And I was totally fascinated and drawn towards this. And as I've been learning to play it myself, the better I get at it, the more I'm able to express that longing, the more I'm drawn on to express that longing, even though bizarrely it becomes more and more painful because in expressing it, I'm coming closer to the possibility of something which is beyond my current experience. And yeah, that is, I suppose, where the two aspects of my two flavors of Abhilasa Shraddha meet, because in the intensity of the absence of that thing in my experience, it brings the possibility of that experience closer to me. So I hope that made some sense. It's very difficult to talk about, I think, Shraddha, but so it feels like it's more of an evocation of something rather than an explanation, but I hope that is useful.